How do you do? Jen and Cam feel it would be unkind to present this program without a friendly word of warning. We are about to unfold our true crime podcast, a podcast of lifelong friends who seek to examine crimes which were committed without reckoning upon God. The discussion will be frank, and the subject matter will be of a grim and violent nature. I think it will thrill you. It might even horrify you. So, if there are young children listening, or if you feel unwilling to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, Cam, how are you?
I am stupendous. How are you?
I am great.
Oh.
Comparatively, the world, I have nothing with what's going on in the world. I have nothing to complain about.
Me either, my friend. Me either.
So,
I hear you have a good case, and I hear it's local. Is
it's
that correct?
very local. Yeah, today we're going to stay right here in St. Louis. And in fact, it's part of St. Louis that's very close to where Cam and I spent our early 20s.
Oh.
We used to live down around the
20s.
area. Mm-hmm. We are headed to the Dutchtown area in South St. Louis.
Dutch.
Yep. Dutchtown may be the most heavily populated and biggest neighborhood east of Grand Boulevard. And Grand Boulevard is this major boulevard or street that runs north and south through all of St. Louis. And it was settled in the early 19th century by many Germans. And so instead of Dutchtown, it should be actually Deutschtown. Mm-hmm. In that area, there's a lot of great resale shops, little great boutique stores. And also, it's home of one of the famous Ted Drew's custard locations. If you've been to St. Louis and you haven't been to Ted Drew's, you're missing out at one of the local hotspots. So it's where everybody goes after a Cardinals baseball game. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody.
Yep.
Yeah. Are you ready?
I'm super excited.
Let me just say, with every articles I read and everything, I've learned so much about a case that I thought I knew. Let's just put it that way.
I love that. That's part of the reason I like doing this. I really do. I learn a lot.
After midnight on Monday, November 5th, 1989, Zein Isa called 911 and reported that a 16-year-old daughter, Palestina, or Tina, as she's known to her American friends, had tried to attack him with a knife during the attack, and he stabbed her. First responders were sent to the Delor Park in the 3700 block of Delor. Tina was lying on the floor, and beside her were two bloody knives. Zein Isa and his wife Maria didn't say much to the first responders. Their youngest child lay dead on the floor, and Zayne began to describe how Tina had come home late and began demanding $5,000.
At 16?
At 16, yeah.
Okay.
And I want to say this too. It's Zein Isa. Many people have said it's Isa, but when you pronounce it in Arabic, it's Isa. Zayne said that he had refused because he only had $50 or $60 on him. And he said that then Tina got upset and grabbed a knife from the kitchen and tried to stab him with it. He said that he had grabbed Tina's wrist and took the knife from her before stabbing her in the chest. He told the St. Louis Post-Dispatch newspaper, quote, "She came at me with the knife. If she's not dead, I did." He spoke very few words in English. He mostly spoke, in his native language. He had a small cut on his hand that he said he sustained during the struggle. Zayne and his wife, Maria, were brought into the station to make a statement. Zayne was released on suspicion of murder, while Maria was just let go. Zayne then was released a few hours later because the maximum hold time had elapsed. Plus, the circuit attorney's office didn't feel as though there was enough evidence to justify an arrest.
Definitely some questions, I would say.
Oh, there's a bunch of questions, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Assistant Circuit Attorney Robert Craddock told the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, quote, "This case needs more investigation. The suspect says Tina Isa pulled a knife out first. We need to talk to the wife who is unavailable when the detectives applied for the warrant. We need medical records and other things. We'll be examining this case closely, and it will be presented to the grand jury. Zein Isa was a Palestinian Muslim. He had moved to South America years prior, where he met and married a Brazilian woman named Maria. They had 4 daughters, Aziza, Fatima, and Soraya, and, of course, Tina. Tina was the youngest. She was born on December 3rd, 1972. Zayne also had a wife and 3 more children in the West Bank. It's pretty common when, or back in the day, when these Palestinian men would move over to the States to send home money to his other family, that they would take a wife here also.
Really?
2 wives, 2 sets of families. Or at least from what I read, it was fairly common.
A little
kind of be
expensive.
a slap in the face. Yeah. The family moved between Brazil, Puerto Rico, and the West Bank before settling in St. Louis in the mid-1980s. Zayne opened a corner store, and Tina adjusted to American life quite quickly. Tina had a mixed heritage, and she spoke Arabic, Portuguese, Spanish, and English. Her mother was Catholic, and she and her sisters conformed to her father's values, meaning to his customs in his Palestinian customs, which didn't give a lot of freedom to the girls, to the women, I should say, to any women. Tina actually moved here to St. Louis when she was 12, and she didn't really know the language, so she had to take English as a second language, but she was really bright, a brilliant girl. Tina began to attend Roosevelt High School, where she achieved good grades and played for her school's sports team. She really loved soccer. And outside of school, she worked in the family store, being the only unmarried child still living at home and the only one who could translate for both her mother and father. She was always the translator. People would come in. She was able to speak on behalf of her father and her mother, or translate. You know what I'm saying.
I got you.
When Tina began to display normal American teenage behavior, her parents worried that she was starting to rebel. And as a result, they restricted her social life even further, forbidding her from attending class trips, college prep. She had a scholarship to go for a summer, but they wouldn't allow her to go. And even her prom. I mean, she wasn't even allowed to stay the night at friends' houses because it would shame her father if she was seen not sleeping under his roof.
The other girls, they're married, right?
They are married, and they're under their husbands now instead of the father.
Are the husbands that they married, are they Palestinians as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Muslim. Tina had begun dating a boy named Cliff Walker in early 1989. Cliff was a young black teenager who she met in school. And Tina and Cliff did go to prom together. Tina snuck out and went, but Tina didn't get to stay long because her sisters and her mother turned up and forced her to leave. They made this huge scene during, it was horrible. Maria and one of the daughters, Fatima, met with Tina's guidance counselor. And Maria told that guidance counselor that she was removing Tina from school because she was, quote, not obeying family rules, and because she didn't want her daughter to continue to see Cliff. They were very racist against black people.
What it
really
was.
Slander. There was even in one of the books I read that we'll talk about later, that Maria actually physically fought with some of the black customers that came into the store.
What?
Just horribly racist. They needed to be shot on sight racist.
You wonder why their daughter chose a black man.
Doesn't matter. She fell in love with him. It's just, yeah. A few days later, Maria came back and told the guidance counselor that Tina was acting like a tramp and a whore, and neither she nor her husband wanted her daughter to go out with a black boy. Now, Tina exceeded in school, and she had dreams of studying aeronautical engineering to become a pilot. She wasn't interested in getting married until late in life. I mean, she wanted to travel the world, and she wanted to be independent. But following her death, many people came forward and spoke to the press about her. The school principal, Mr. Purdy, told the Post-Dispatch, quote, "We're in shock here. She was really a super kid. The students and the faculty really liked her a great deal. She had a smile for everyone." Her friends described her as happy, caring, and helpful. Andrew Luffy, who managed the apartment building the family lived in, said, quote, "She was a very nice girl. She has some relatives who live there too, and she was the only one who could speak good English. She often took her nieces and nephews to the swimming pool and did a fine job in watching them. She wasn't your typical teenager, if you know what I mean. She wasn't wild or snippy or into drugs or cigarette smoking. She was a very conventional, young, sweet girl. I can't picture her being a problem." She was a normal teenager in the 80s. She
sounds like a good kid, actually.
She
Better than we were.
She loved music like Poison. And I mean, when I read this book, I'm like, I totally related to her. She's only a couple years younger than we are. Tina's parents had been released without charge, but Zayne was rearrested the following day, although he would be allowed to attend Tina's funeral. In handcuffs, mind you. Warrants had been granted for his arrest on charges of murder and armed criminal action. Lieutenant Harry Heger told St. Louis Post-Dispatch, her close friends at school told us that she had been physically abused many times by her parents. According to her friends, it was not unusual for Tina to appear at school with bruises, welts, and various injuries. The physical abuse seemed to be routine. The investigators had been told that Tina's parents had strongly opposed to her relationship and her behavior, which was far more conservative than the average teenagers. I mean, they took Tina to the doctors constantly to make sure that she was still a virgin.
What?
Mm-hmm.
See, as a doctor, do you need to report that? I would
maybe
think
not in the 80s. A totally different world back then. It should have been better, but it wasn't. And Tina had run away from home for a few days, but her sisters and parents had convinced her to come back. In fact, one of the police officers that spoke with Maria when Tina ran away was also one of the officers that showed up the night she was murdered. And he said that, quote, Maria was more emotional the evening she reported her daughter missing. So, red flag there. Her friends believed that Tina may have told her parents that she was leaving again before she was killed. That her friends believed that may have been the reason why her parents attacked her.
Yeah, I would say so.
Dr. Philip Birch, a St. Louis medical examiner, performed the autopsy on Tina's remains. He found that she had sustained 6 puncture wounds on her left breast and a number of small nicks on her neck and chest. Dr. Birch believed that the close proximity of the wounds indicated that Tina was not moving when they were inflicted. The fatal wounds had gone through the breastbone into her heart, and another penetrated her left lung. They weren't wounds usually seen in self-defense cases due to the force that would have been needed to cause the injuries. And in fact, that Tina had cuts on her hands as though she had tried to shield herself from the knife indicated that she was fighting for her life.
Yeah, she's the one with the defensive wounds.
Mm-hmm. Maria Isa told the police that she didn't see her husband stab Tina, but she did say that she had grabbed her from behind during the struggle. She said she pulled her hair back, to hold her back. She was holding her back by her hair.
Was she holding her back or holding her steady?
There, we'll see in just a second. There was bruising found on the top of her head and scratch marks along her neck. And there were also small hairs found in Tina's hands during the exam, and they appeared to be arm hair. Zein Isa was held on $1 million bond because he was considered a flight risk. Because why? He had connections in South America and West Bank. Tina had called the Department of Family Services in the weeks prior to her death to report the physical abuse that she had been inflicted on by her parents. But didn't seem anything was done. And in fact, a DFS worker did come, and he did 2 visits. He talked to Tina in front of her parents. And he claimed, he didn't really see any signs of physical abuse. Like, he didn't see any bruises or anything. So he closed the case. And I've been talking about the book I was reading. It's called Guarding the Secrets, and it's by Ellen Harris. And this DFS person seemed to have taken sides with the parents.
She's 16.
The parents were saying, oh, she's rebelling, she's doing this. And the DFS agent seemed to say stuff like, oh, well, we all know teenagers, they take for granted everything that they have, everything that the parents do. I understand. And then when they brought up about her dating Cliff, who is black, the social worker said, oh, I can relate to that. My ex-wife is now seeing a black man. So, yeah.
Lots of thoughts. I'm going to keep them to myself.
Oh, I know. It's bad. But the only thing that came out of it was the worker told Zayne that he had to pay her for working at his corner store, and she needed to be back in school.
Did she make it back to school?
For a very short period of time.
Okay.
And this is fun to note, the FBI had begun surveillance on Zein Isa and his associates when they moved to the United States. Zayne was suspected of conspiring with the Abu Nidal organization, which is a Palestinian terrorist group. It's an offshoot of the PLO, which the State Department called the world's most dangerous terrorist group in 1989. This is around the time we're talking. This is the time we're talking here. Zayne is thought to have been the ringleader here in St. Louis of the group.
Really?
Uh-huh. The FBI has Zayne on tape with 4 other members talking about blowing up the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., and gathering an army of sorts to, quote, kill 3,000 American Jews. They have over 7,000 hours of tape on him.
Listening to him?
Uh-huh. In an FBI affidavit, Zayne is quoted as saying, I am one of the people who spread corruption on earth because there is nothing left to lose. Let the world burn down. Now, as part of the FBI investigation, wiretaps and recording devices had been set up on Isa's home to record conversations with other alleged members of this terrorist cell.
Mm-hmm.
The wiretaps weren't live. That means there wasn't somebody sitting there writing it down as it happened. These bugs were voice activated. They would only go off when somebody spoke. There was one bug on the phone, and then there was one that was in a closet in the hallway. And then they would have a translator come in, maybe once every 2 to 3 weeks, and translate the recording. And a lot of the times it would just be, unless it was not really pertaining to the terrorists' stuff, it would just be
small talk.
They'd just kind of summarize it. The translators would summarize it. But the night that Tina was killed, the devices recorded the last 8 minutes of her life.
They did?
They recorded it all. They got everything.
Ooh.
That night, Tina had gotten a job at Wendy's. It was close to home. She didn't tell her parents because she was fearful of how they would react, because her parents didn't want her to work anywhere but the family's grocery store. That was bring shame if she worked anywhere else. She did leave a note on the TV telling them that she would be back around 11:30 that night.
So they didn't know where she was going?
That night, she said, I am working at Wendy's. I will be home at 11:30. That's it. She was just going to face the wrath when she got home.
Oh. Huh.
Mm-hmm. And according to an FBI affidavit, Tina was aware of her father's activity in the Abu Nidal organization. She actually told friends that her dad was a terrorist. You know, she's like, oh, yeah, my dad's a terrorist. Blah, 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 blah.
Oh.
Yeah. And from part of what I read, people laughed because he was this diabetic man, that small guy hobbling on crutches. Yeah. He didn't look like a terrorist. He wasn't somebody that you would think in your mind's eye a terrorist would look like.
Yeah, but he's at the top, so
he was the ringleader. But you wouldn't know. You just know he was this grumpy old bastard that ran a grocery store.
Here's my mom. She's a stay-at-home mom. Here's my dad. He's a terrorist and one of the leading
she
organizations.
Worked at the store. My mom beats up people at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. Tina was going to be turning 17 at the end of December, and so she told her boyfriend that she planned on leaving the home when she did. Like, she was going to be free of the house. She just had to make it till she was 17. She was an adult. She could do it.
They knew that then, the parents.
That night, Cliff walked her home from work, and he later said, quote, she told me to wait outside for her, that she'd come back out, but she never did. Just before 12 a.m., Tina walked through the front door. Her parents were waiting for her, and the recording device picked up their conversation. Maria said, quote, where have you been, bitch? Tina told her that she'd been working at Wendy's. Her parents began to berate her for behavior that they found to be shameful, and Zayne brought up her relationship with Cliff. He told her that until she reached the age of 18, he was prepared to provide for her, but said that she did nothing but eat, drink, and sleep in their house. Maria asked Tina if she wanted to be able to continue to live at home, and Tina said just throw her out. They asked where she would go, and Tina said, did it really matter? It didn't matter. Maria demanded that Tina hand over her house key before Zayne could be heard saying, quote, listen here, my dear daughter. Do you know that this is the last night? Tonight, you're going to die. Maria began to go through Tina's bag and accused her of having stuff she shouldn't have, like shoes and school books. And Zayne went into the kitchen and retrieved a knife before going back into the living room. Now, Tina was upset that Maria was going through her bag because she had placed a note to the police saying that if anything were to happen to her, that if she died, it was because of her parents.
Yeah, for a 16-year-old, do you know how heartbreaking that is? To even have to
to know.
think that and then actually put it down on paper?
She actually gave one of these notes to an acquaintance friend. And they're like, what's this? And she's like, well, just keep it. And of course, the friend didn't remember where she placed it, but she later did come to the police with it. Tina could be heard screaming, and she pleaded with her mother for help while the father shouted at her to keep still. Maria asked Tina if she was going to listen, and Tina called out that she would before beginning to cough. Maria told her to shut up, and Zayne said, quote, die quickly, clean her, quiet little one. Die, my daughter, die.
Oh my, that's awful.
The police reported that the recording device had been knocked on the floor during the struggle, allowing it to record Tina's murder. Translators were brought in to write an English transcript of the recording, which contained Arabic, Portuguese, and some English. When the translator got to this part, which of course was 2 weeks later, he had to turn it off. He couldn't listen anymore. It was that
You're
disturbing.
Listening to a 16-year-old die.
They
by
also
the hand of her parents.
And from the book recorded or said that after Zayne murdered his daughter in cold blood, he just went to the bathroom and then came back like nothing had happened. Like didn't even wash his hands before or after. As I said, the FBI weren't monitoring the bugs in real life time, so nobody could prevented Tina's death. Like they couldn't have rushed in to save Tina. But there were signs that the murder had been a long time coming.
I guess that's why the dad was so calm. They knew it was coming.
They knew. He had planned it. Zein Isa's cohorts in the terrorist group had urged him to kill Tina or have her kidnapped and brought to the West Bank because she knew too much. Recorded conversations between Zayne and relatives showed that he had spoken about Tina being beyond saving and how her behavior was so shameful that she should be killed for it. In one recording, he said, quote, you know, for me, this one has become a burned woman, a black whore, and there is no way to cleanse her except through the red color that cleanses her. When the glass is broken, it cannot be repaired. In August, 2 months before Tina was killed, Zayne told a friend, quote, there is no way to teach her manners. Teaching her has to take place in the hotel underground. In conversations with Tina's older sister, Zayne said that he would put a knife in her hand after she fell. Her sister also said that she should go to the homeland in a box. In October, Zayne told his daughter, Fatima, quote, let me put in my teeth and tell you a harsh word. If God makes my wish, I'll put her in the grave. Fatima replied, may God pain her. May God make her sleep and not get up. She is a whore. She will never enter my house.
Was he like that with his other daughters?
No, they were married and they behaved and they did whatever he told her. Like they did arranged marriage when the girls were 16.
Oh, so they didn't even have time to rebel.
So They went from being these American-like teenagers to being married and living to being another man's problem. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Soraya, another one of Tina's sisters, told her father to chain Tina in the basement and that if he killed Tina, they would defend him as they believed that he had acted in accordance to the law of their beliefs. She also suggested that they hire a black man to kill her and make it look, like a... Yeah.
Okay.
Trust me, when I was reading this, I'm like, these are like the ugly stepsisters. And then
really
further
are.
along in the book, the police are quoted as saying it's like a Cinderella story.
Mm-hmm.
The sisters were so jealous of Tina. Tina's sisters were true to their word. Zayne had called Fayrouz, which was Zayne's daughter from his other marriage. He called her immediately after he killed Tina and appeared to be constructing his version of events. He told her, quote, Tina came at 12. You understand, $5,000 or you die. She grabbed a knife from the kitchen and came straight toward me. By force, me and her mother, and I took the knife from her and stabbed her with it, and she died. Fayrouz would always try to talk her father out of killing Tina. She and her husband did not approve of the murder at all.
Thank goodness.
Yet
Thank goodness
she
somebody's smart.
But she wouldn't publicly go against her father.
Well, of course not.
Like immediately after this happened, she left to go back to West Bank. She gathered up her kids and left the country. Maria Isa was arrested in late November because the hairs found in Tina's hands during the autopsy were consistent with hairs from Maria's arms. Lieutenant Harry Heger, who was on the case, told Post-Dispatch that they had felt all along that the mother was a participant, but they didn't want to disclose what role they believed she had had. A grand jury indicted Zayne and Maria on charges of first-degree murder, and the assistant circuit attorney, D. Joyce Hayes, the Joyce Hayes' last name, it's hyphenated, told the judge that they would be seeking the death penalty. The couple was held without bond as a result. Following a pretrial hearing in mid-December of 1989, D. Joyce Hayes said that the proximity of the wounds on Tina's chest led them to believe that she had been stabbed while someone else was holding her down.
I wonder who that was.
Both of her parents had blood on their clothing when the authorities arrived. Basically, instead of holding Tina back from attacking her father, Maria held Tina down while her father attacked her. There were signs all along that Tina was at risk. In fact, her high school had called the child abuse hotline to report her suspicions when Tina came to school covered in bruises. It's unclear if the abuse was ever investigated. Tina's high school principal said that she was a girl you'd be proud of as a daughter. He told the Post-Dispatch, quote, "When we see signs of physical or educational neglect, we call the hotline. We make frequent calls to the hotline. It's the policy of our school to report suspicions." And like I said, when Maria and the sister came in to the counselor's office, and they commented that Tina was a whore and a tramp. And they said that Fatima actually said that if Tina was her daughter, she would kill her, which, said, well, if you kill her, you're going to go to jail. But after they left, the counselor told the principal that she thought that they were going to stone Tina.
Wow.
It was that bad. Tenants of the Isa also spoke about their knowledge of the abuse. Jeff Kelly and Tina O'Malley had seen bruises on her face numerous occasions, and she told them that her father had beat her and was upset with her because, quote, she had a black boyfriend and that he had arranged for her to marry a relative of her brother-in-law, which this family's tradition was to marry your first cousins. Basically, so you would marry your
first cousin?
Yes. So if we went by that law, you would marry your mother's brother's son.
Ew. No thanks. I'm good.
Mm-hmm. Jeff told the Post-Dispatch, quote, "She said her father told her she had disgraced the family. She was 16 and she was chasing after her dreams. She didn't want an arranged marriage." People who went to their store also saw Tina being beaten by her father. Like I said before, Tina told her friends that she thought her father was going to kill her. I mean, they knew she was being beaten, yet there's nothing. Her friends gave her refuge when she left for 3 or 4 days. That's who she went to. Tina's friends and her boyfriend Cliff were most affected by her death. Cliff said that they had met while he was living in the Shaw neighborhood, which is just a few blocks over from Dutchtown. And even after he moved to North City, he would get on the bus to come and see her as often as possible. Tina had planned to leave a couple times, but she was determined to leave on December 3rd, her 17th birthday. Cliff said, quote, "Every day I wake up, I think about her. I miss her." In the book, he talks about how he waited for Tina outside. And then when he finally left and he was going home and he was waiting for the bus, he heard an ambulance.
That just gave me the chills.
Haunts him to this day because he didn't know until the following morning. Murders like Tina are commonly referred to as honor killings. An honor killing is defined as the killing of a relative, especially a girl or a woman, who is perceived to have brought dishonor to the family. The term honor crime or honor killing can often reinforce the misconceptions that violence or abuse is justified because the victim has brought shame upon someone. This can allow the perpetrators to try to justify the abuse as cultural or religious normality when, in fact, it's not. An overwhelming majority of Muslims and Palestinians do not condone honor-based violence. An article written by Roger Worthington in the Chicago Tribune from 1993, and he writes, quote, "that most Islamic people find these so-called honor killings horrifying, and these killings are caused by sexism, not Islam." And he also quoted a comment on a YouTube video that said, "This isn't Islam, it's Hislam."
Oh, yeah.
Tina's strong will and brave defiance in the face of her parents' regime was ultimately the agitator that led to her untimely death. Tina wanted the fundamental freedom to choose how to live and who to love, but her parents, or more so her father, cared more about their preconceived reputation than they did about their daughter's life. Anne Reinerson spoke to the Post-Dispatch at the time, and she was the director of cross-cultural services at the International Institute in St. Louis. Ms. Reinerson said, quote, "The whole process of cultural integration of children threatens all the things that give traditional men pride in themselves, like having control of their household. Control over the daughter's sexuality is especially important in many ethnic communities, partially because people see cultural continuity in large part as passed down through women. The child often acculturates very quickly, as Tina apparently did, while the parents acculturate very slowly or not at all. The child may acculturate at rather superficial levels by wearing the same kind of clothes and listening to the same kind of music as her schoolmates, for instance, while her underlying values have not changed at all. But the parents don't always understand that, and they feel threatened by the superficial changes." The murder trial was delayed as Isa's attorney, Daniel Reardon, filed motions to suppress the wiretap evidence. Reardon called the FBI recordings shocking and a breach of the Bill of Rights. It was ultimately admitted into trial, but could only be used for the jury to decide Zein Isa's guilt, not Maria's. When the trial began in October 1991, defense attorney Reardon, who only represented Zayne at this point, said that Zayne had acted in self-defense and alleged that Tina had become violent in the months before her death. Reardon said that Tina would kick her father and hit him with a meat cleaver and, quote, developed an absolute hatred for her father and had threatened him on any number of occasions. Maria's attorney, Charles M. Shaw, said that she was only guilty of being married to Zayne and that she had begun to take Tina's side in the arguments. She was going against Zayne most of the time, and yeah. Up until her final days, she would do anything to please Zayne. She knew what he did was wrong. She knew it. She didn't agree with it, but she still went along with it.
Maybe she was scared of him.
I'm sure she was, but she still did it. She made a conscious effort to do it.
Yes.
The state's case was that Zayne and Maria had planned to kill their youngest daughter because she was not conforming to their expectations and because they were abusive. The assistant circuit attorney, D. Joyce Hayes, said, quote, "Many bad things have been done in the name of the Christian religion and in the name of Islam. We are not here to blame Islam or Islamic culture. We are here to blame these people." Yeah. The horrific tapes were played to the jury. The 8 minutes of Tina's death and the conversations about her death from before and after she was stabbed. Many of the people on the jury cried after they heard the tapes. Even the judge wiped tears from his eyes. And one juror would tell how he went to buy a birthday card, and while he was in the store, a little toddler started to throw a fit and started to cry, and it kind of gave him a little PTSD. Mm-hmm. And he started to shake, and he had a panic attack and had to leave the store. One of the state's prosecutors told the Post-Dispatch, quote, "You've got to be a little ghoulish to be in this business. We're always passing around terrible pictures of murder victims of each other's cases, and you reach a point where you feel almost immune, but this tape is in a league of its own." Witnesses told the court about the abuse that they knew Tina had suffered at the hands of her parents. Her guidance counselor testified that she believed Tina's mother and sister were going to disown her after she met them to discuss withdrawing Tina from school. Cliff Walker testified about things Tina had told him, how she was beaten when her parents knew that they had been together, and how he had waited for her outside for 15 minutes when he walked her home. He said, quote, "She told me if I heard screaming and stuff, she would come back out." The prosecutor asked him if Tina came back out, and he said no. Zein Isa testified in his own defense, speaking through a translator. He said that he had struggled with Tina on the floor to get the knife from her. He admitted to putting his bare foot in her mouth at one point to stop her from screaming. He's a monster.
That's, there's no words.
Zayne said, quote, "From the first stab, she lost all strength. When I said, 'You're going to die tonight,' she already had the knife in her hand. I then directed the knife toward her to stab her until she fell down." When he was cross-examined by Assistant Circuit Attorney Joyce Hayes, he said that Tina became upset when her mother began going through her belongings, but he couldn't remember what they were saying. The prosecutor asked him if it was because he had gone to get a knife from the kitchen, and he denied that he had. He said Tina was the one that got the knife, and Maria had diverted her attention so he could grab it from her. He said that he had bent the knife in Tina's direction and stabbed her. He said that Tina had never shown him any respect. And he told the court, quote, "If I would ask her to bring me a cup of coffee or a glass of water, she would kick me or hit me in the leg."
I don't think so. I do not believe that for a second.
And no. He denied having any racial prejudice against Cliff Walker, and even went as far as saying that he had offered Tina $5,000 toward a wedding if she wanted to marry Cliff. But when you ask Cliff about it, that never happened.
I'd say $5,000 to stay away from Cliff, maybe.
But he wanted to marry her off, and she refused. And actually, they were at one of her sister's wedding, and her best friend came, and she told her best friend, "That's the guy my dad wants me to marry." And her best friend goes, "Oh my God, he is ugly."
Said like a true 16-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Zayne said that none of his other children had been rebellious, and he would have been happy if her behavior had become 50% more acceptable. Over 4 hours of testimony, he tried in vain to justify his actions in killing his 16-year-old daughter. Maria never did take the stand. He never did say that he always blamed everything on Tina. He never.
Well, obviously, she's 16.
Mm.
I'm sure.
Just under 4 hours of deliberations, the jury found Zein and Maria Isa guilty of their daughter's murder. In order for them to be eligible for the death penalty, the prosecution had to prove that there were at least one aggravating circumstances. The jury had proven 3. 1, that they had inflicted suffering on Tina for the purpose of making her suffer before death. 2, that they had committed repeated and excessive acts of abuse. 3, and that she was rendered useless or bound during the attack, which exhibited a callous disregard for her life. Before her sentence was delivered in December 1991, Maria told the judge, quote, "My daughter was very rebellious, disobedient. We shouldn't be going to prison. We shouldn't have to pay for it with our lives for what Tina did." That was Maria. Did you get that?
What did she do that was just so awful? Boy, they really need to see
She dated a man of color. That's what she did.
And she didn't get him a soda when he wanted one or coffee?
No, she did all that. That was a lie. She was a very obedient child. She worked hard at her parents' grocery store. She translated for them. She did all sorts of things for her. She just wanted to be free. She wanted, her dad never paid her for working in the store. He gave her money and everything, but she wanted money. She wanted independence. She wanted to go to that college prep thing. She wanted to spend the night with her. She wanted to go to prom.
She wanted to be a kid.
She wanted to be an American kid like all of her friends. That was the big deal, and they blamed it all on dating a person of color. Zayne and Isa were both sentenced to be executed by lethal injection. As she was sentenced, Maria cried. Assistant Circuit Attorney Robert Craddock said, quote, "Maria is crying a lot because she and her husband planned this murder and got caught."
Yep, sure did.
Their daughter, Fatima, told reporters that she found the verdict to be unfair and that her father had simply been defending his honor. Fatima said, quote, "If my father is sent to death because he is a Muslim, then he is proud of himself to die that way."
He's not sent to death because he's a Muslim. He is sent to death because he killed somebody.
His religion or ethnicity had nothing to do with why he was sentenced to death. I hate those women. I'm telling you, they're horrible women. And if you read the book, you'll not like them as much as I do. The judge dismissed any notion that the abuse and murder were linked to the Isa's culture or beliefs. They were not acting in accordance to the law or their home or beliefs. They were abusive parents who killed their daughter. Zein Isa was indicted on organized crime charges in 1993, just a few years after he was sentenced to death. In fact, they were RICO charges. The federal case alleged that Tina was not killed because she had rebelled, but because she had knew too much about her father's association with the Abu Nidal organization.
That could be.
Zayne was never...
Maybe she threatened him, too. Like, I want out of here. I do not want an arranged marriage, and if you don't let me, I'm going to tell the authorities. That would probably be enough to do it.
She could have. I mean, it's never mentioned. Zayne was never going to be released anyway, so they didn't pursue the case. And in 1997, he died due to complications associated with diabetes, which is much too good for him. Maria Isa had filed an appeal against her sentence. She claimed that the court had erred when the judge issued an instruction to the jury that linked her conduct with her husband during the penalty phase of the trial. The instruction read that if the jury found Maria guilty of the aggravating factors mentioned previously, they could sentence her to death. And in 1993, Maria's verdict was affirmed, but the court did find issue with the penalty phase. Her sentence was adjusted to life without parole. Her lawyer, Charles M. Shaw, said, quote, "I don't think she's guilty of anything. She was reduced from being a woman to being a beast of burden. She didn't stab anybody. She didn't aid in stabbing anybody." Maria Isa had been the first woman sentenced to death under modern capital punishment legislation in St. Louis, but ultimately she lived out the rest of her life behind bars. She died in April 2014 of natural causes. She was 70 years old and was imprisoned in Vandalia. This was also interesting. Reading the book, I found out that Zayne and his group were helping the A&O by raising money through how? Coupon fraud.
Oh, wow.
Nickel and diming it. I read an article in South Coast Today written by Lance Gay, and I'm going to read this straight from the article. The trial of associates of bin Laden for the 1992 bombing of New York's World Trade Center showed how American-based cells raised $100 million to finance their activities by processing coupons through food stores they financed in New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia. These terrorists would come over, open stores, and then they would take newspapers that should have been returned. They'd take all the coupons out of the newspaper. They'd cut them out. This is what their wives and daughters would do. And then they'd redeem them to the manufacturer without actually selling the product.
Oh, okay.
And I know Zayne, for one, would hired somebody to go to people that had food stamps that were usually junkies, drug addicts, I should say, is a better term, or people that were really in need of cash. And they would buy their food stamps for like pennies on the dollar. Mm-hmm. And then they would turn around and the food stamps would be put into the store where they would collect the money for nothing. They'd just turn in the food stamps, not the supplies.
Yeah.
They would also have people that would maybe come in with, I don't know, a pallet or maybe a box of baby formula that they had probably stolen from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And Zayne would give them money and then he would sell the baby formula on the shelves.
Wow. He's such a nice guy.
Yeah. So
he's an entrepreneur, I guess.
But yeah, the whole thing, like that's how they were getting these RPGs and that's how they were doing it through coupon fraud of all things. Coupons. I never knew that at all. That's what they were arrested on. The RICO charges.
Wow. This is what I got to say about that.
Yeah. So, also, I thought this was very interesting. You know, Zayne married Maria, and Maria was a white Brazilian. Mm-hmm. He saw no issue with this kind of mixed race marriage. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
I had
she also didn't share the same religious views. She was a Catholic.
Practicing Catholic?
Not for sure, but she was Catholic.
Huh.
But also to note that Tina would have turned 49 this past December, and hopefully she would have become a pilot and possibly got married. And
what happened to the sisters? Do you know?
They're still around. They're all married.
Are they in St. Louis?
From what I heard, Ferouz, the one that totally, I guess it was their stepsister, she left the country and went back.
But she's the one that thought it was wrong.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, the other sisters, the book was written in 1995. So as far as I know, they're still here in St. Louis. I think one was in Wisconsin.
Oh. If any of them hear this and they contact us, that would be great.
We'd love to talk to them.
Have some questions. Yes. Yes.
Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, if you want to know more about this case, if you want to dive more into Zayne's background, including a bit more of his like terrorist ways and everything, pick up the book Guarding Secrets by Ellen Harris. You can get it on Amazon. I'm sure it's out of print. She also is the one that wrote the book Dying to Get Married, about the 3-parter that we did, Sex, Lies, and Duct Tape, about Dennis Bullock that was here in St. Louis. I believe it's episode 38. That's on Amazon too. Like I said, I think they're both out of print, but I'm sure maybe you can find them at a used bookstore, thrift store. Otherwise, you can get them somewhere where used books are sold. But otherwise, that's it. That's poor Tina.
Unbelievable. I remember when that happened.
I do too.
I don't remember all that. I never knew that he had terrorist
I
contacts.
didn't either.
I didn't know that.
I had no idea. No clue. And then the whole thing about the coupons shocked the hell out of me. I mean, that's a lot of coupons.
Sure is. It's a lot of money, too.
Yeah.
Oof. Huh.
But, yeah, poor Tina. Poor Cliff. I mean, could you imagine?
Wonder where
and
Cliff
her girlfriend?
is today. Cliff, if you're out there, contact us. That would be even better. I'd rather talk to him, I think.
From all accounts, he seemed like a very sweet boy.
So did
they
she.
Said that he was. Like said that he didn't even smoke cigarettes. He was a good kid. He was very well spoken. Very. What do I want to say? He seemed very educated. He was a good kid. He wasn't like a party going. He didn't do drugs. He was just a good kid. Mm-hmm. And there was nothing to
Zayne
not like
could
about
marry
him.
Outside of his culture.
I hope my daughters find someone like Cliff. That's what I want to say.
Just a nice guy.
A nice guy.
Nice person.
That's all you want. But
Jen, that was really good.
It's very sad.
And I guess that happens a lot more abroad than we hear about, I'm sure.
Actually, no. It is looked down on in Muslim countries. I mean, it's not anything to be proud of. It's not a thing. In fact, it's more common for people that come from there to the United States than it is to do over in those countries.
Is that because their wily children are becoming like American teenagers and they can't take it? Is that why?
I'm not for sure. Probably. And it's that perceived honor thing, that it's perceived that they've gone against them and that they've brought dishonor to the family, which, what is that? I don't know what that is. We all have skeletons in our closet, but no, it's a horrible thing.
Well, you did a really good job. Lots of resources. And let's give you a big round of applause for names.
Thank you. I found this charming lady on YouTube that was like the proper ways to pronounce some Arabic names. And she's darling. I mean, she's so cute.
You did it mighty nicely.
It's pronounce.com.
And if you didn't, I'm sure we'll hear about it. So there's that.
I made sure to look under the Arabic pronunciation of everything. But yeah, those sisters were awful. I mean, they would conspire with Zayne.
But you know what? They might have been a little jealous too.
And it was the two of the younger sisters, and one was only a couple years older than.
How bitter would you be
Tina?
if you were 16 and they forced you to get married, and then your little sister's not married and is kind of fighting it?
Well, how babies always get away with stuff, right?
Totally.
There's authors, David Sedaris, talks about how the babies have been more lenient. Parents are always more lenient to their. Totally. And he said when I was born, he was first born, and he said, it starts off with there's no smoking pot. And by the last kid is, can we please not smoke pot in the house?
Yeah, totally.
Right? Yeah.
Totally true.
So that's how it is. And but boy, were they jealous of her. And I cannot imagine. I mean, I was the baby. I know I got away with murder. And I know my brother used to bitch to me about the stuff that I got away with. But I doubt that he would tell my mom to chain me up in the basement or hire somebody to kill me.
Was that supposed to just have her be down there forever, like a prisoner? Or
yeah,
were they gonna
and chain her up until she could be shipped back home in a box.
Oh, lovely. Lovely. Okay.
Yeah. And the night, I believe, if I remember this correctly from the book, the night that they murdered Tina, Maria called one of the girls. And I think she was kind of expressing doubt. And the daughter kept on saying, oh, mother, she steals from the store. She does this. She's a whore. She opens her legs for that black boy. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, so her daughter was
fired her up.
Exactly.
Unbelievable.
It's amazing. And like they said, it's not Islam, it's Hislam. It's misogynistic bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, on that note, any thing you've been watching? I know you have. You can't lie about that.
Duh. Started The Dropout, which is about Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos. Yep. Really good. Amanda Siegfried did a really good job. Watched The Worst Roommate Ever yesterday.
I did too. I did watch that.
Boy, I just remember that there was a little girl, I think she was on Twitter or something. I say little girl, she was probably like 30, but she was looking for help because she had a Airbnb. And there's a little rule in there that I guess if you stay in a place, I don't remember it exactly, but if you stay in a rental for more than 30 days, you can claim residency. And so these people, knowing that rule, had rented it for, say, 28 days. Well, then they pretended like something happened and we're just going to have to stay here a few more days, the ticket, the passport, whatever the reason was. Well, then they were like, bam, gotcha, it's ours. And so she was like, help, I need help. I don't. And I was like, how does that happen? Like, I don't understand how come there aren't better laws for that, squatting and stealing stuff.
Well, that last one, I knew about the Dorothy LaPuente.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
She's pretty famous. But the last one, the Jamison.
The squatter.
That scared me.
That's what I said. Like,
I mean, if you guys definitely need to watch it, and if you're short on time, watch the very last episode.
Last two.
It's a two-parter. He was freaking scary.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
yeah. I never want to own a building to rent anything out because after that, no way in hell.
Me too. What have you been watching besides that? What else?
That's the only thing I've been watching. Besides, every week there's 2 episodes of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which I absolutely enjoy. I love the writing. I love the actors. Tony Shalhoub. Love Tony Shalhoub. She plays Mrs. Maisel's father. He's incredible in it. Just the banter back and forth. Kevin Pollak is in it. He's great. I've always loved him. There's this great scene in one of the episodes where the whole family goes on this giant, Ferris wheel? And they're like all screaming at each other in this conversation. And it's hilarious. It's just, I love it. I actually played it. I watched it again. And then I made my husband come watch it because I just loved it. I loved how it was shot. I loved how the characters spoke with each other and spoke to other people on the Ferris wheel. It was great.
Aww.
But like I said, it's one of
your faves.
Guilty pleasures because I love the era. I love the clothing. The set design in it is amazing. There was one scene that got me a little bit tearful that affected me. It was one of the characters had passed away, and it wasn't even a main character. In fact, I didn't even remember him from last season. And there was somebody gets up to speak at his funeral, and it was quite moving. But me, I'm like crying at a drop of a hat lately.
I know. You are.
But it's great. For lighthearted, if you're just kind of done with true crime, go watch The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I love it. Absolutely fantastic.
Well, good. Well, that's really all we got, right? So, I guess. Hey, Jen, so we have any promos this week?
We do. Thank you for asking. Today, our promo is for Crime Trials. Crime Trials is written by kick-ass writer. Her name is Stephanie Moore. Totally love her. She's funny. She is a lawyer, I believe. And the narrator is our good friend JT from Brew Crime.
Aw, JT.
So make sure to listen and make sure to like and subscribe. It's a really good podcast. Quick, I want to wish today, and when we're recording, is March 6th. It's Sunday. I want to wish Chris, our friend Chris, a happy birthday. Today is her birthday.
Happy birthday.
And also,
birthday. Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, hope everybody has a good rest of the week and weekend. But until then, remember, lock your doors.
Keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya. Today's episode was researched and written by me, Jen. For more information about this episode, as well as all other sources, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by the hosts, Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vettesse from We Talk of Dreams. You can reach Nico at wetalkofdreams.com. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from Octoberpod VHS. You can find all of his great works on YouTube. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter with the handle at Our True Crime Pod. You can also email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We would also at this time like to thank our patrons. We would be so lost without you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to help support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/Our True Crime Podcast. You can also show your support by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or simply just tell your friends about us. It's that easy. Love ya.
Hi listeners, I'm JT, your host for Crime Trials. We are an investigative true crime podcast examining the depraved minds behind the most heinous acts of malice. If you like documentary-style true crime shows with immersive primary source audio, straight from the courtroom, then we are the show for you. We break down motives, evidence, and legal strategies behind past and current high-profile criminal trials. We take you into the mind of the defendant through direct and expert testimony. We review the pre-trial motions and discuss the most compelling evidence introduced at trial. We also cover the evidence deemed too prejudicial for the jury to hear or consider. We explain the legal arguments behind those decisions and discuss how it might have changed or influenced the verdict. Join us at Crime Trials on your favorite podcast player of your choice.